thank you very much. I will start. So, as Alex said, I'm a member and co-founder of the Gun Collective, which is a narrative illustration collective and magazine, and we've been working and producing stuff since 2004. So, this is all the members, the 7 members of Le Gun, 2 designers and 5 artist illustrators. And at the moment we're working on Le Gun number 6, so this is just a publicity shot for that. And this is a picture of me, which you know it's me because I'm here. But and it's advertising one of my artworks, What Load of Rubbish, the print. And I'm standing on a traffic island in Regent Street, which is a couple of meters away from Soho, and Soho's what I'm going to be talking about mostly. So after leaving the Royal College, I started to make this project with a friend of mine called Paul V. Lawford, this other guy with the beard here, and this was in about 2006 to 2010. We did this thing called the Rubbish Men of Soho, which was like we made zines and we made videos and we made artwork and we had a live band. That's us playing at the Art Car Boot Fair one year. And so from that I took the name Robert Rubbish. I liked the kind of sound of that. So that was when my stage name, my artist name was born. Whoops. And here is a drawing of Soho. I'm sure you all know what Soho is or where it is, but it's right in the middle of the West End in London. And it's roughly about a square mile. And this has been a really important place for me since I've come to London, and a lot of my work has been about it. And a lot of Le Gun's early days, we did a lot of stuff around Soho, socialising and shows and other things. So this is, if you imagine what within these streets is what my work for this book, Spiritus Soho, is all about. And this was the first drawing I did in 2015, that when I got the idea that I was going to make this book and 4 shows, a show each year, that was going to be all about Soho, because I've been so interested in it for years that I thought now I was going to collect all the images and all my ideas and start to make artwork. So this was the first drawing, and you'll see these 2 characters. I'll explain who they are later, but things start to develop from that. And over the years I've had an interest in collecting books about Soho, so I sort of read as much as I could. Here's a few from my collection, and they're all different varieties of subjects, and they informed the beginning of the artwork for this project. And some sort of pulpy Soho books are quite hard to get, and I've been researching and reading these for a couple of years. Some other ones all about the history, and then these really old books. So also these books, and having hung around Soho and kind of know a lot of the stories and the history, I started to go on the internet and try and find as much visual information as I could. And I used to find images and download them and print them as photographs, so they've become more like snapshots when I was doing the research for this book. And this varying times and different places in the history of Soho. Some are really obscure old things, some are just random stuff I found. And there's a collection of other photos with some characters, like in the middle, this guy Jake Vegas, who can be sometimes seen with a bag with a stereo in, just leaning on a lamppost. You kind of sometimes see him. This guy here, Terry, who is on a £10 a month retainer from me. And there's other characters like this guy Sebastian Horsley, who was like a modern day dandy. He's in a lot of the work. So, and there's me and Paul when we were the Rubbish Men in this cafe called the Lorelei. So there's kind of personal and things I've found on the internet. So this is the first bit of artwork, which was called Spiritus Soho, which was the starting point. And I like to think of Soho as a woman from that is many different sort of nationalities and kind of mysterious, like a genie, a spirit. So this was the first image I made, which is kind of part serpent goddess, part sort of 60s sort of woman. And so this is the first ever image properly I made for Soho, Spiritus Soho. And then this one, the Dilly Boys, which is based on Quentin Crisp, who was a trailblazing gender bender from the 40s onwards, and he experimented with cross-dressing and all sorts of things in the 30s and 40s when it was quite dangerous to do this, and he used to hang around Piccadilly and Soho, and so this is a picture based on him. Then this is a picture based on a character called Teresa Cornelius, who was the first ever nightclub owner, and she had a nightclub in Soho Square, and she had a child with Casanova, and she had this really weird life that kind of went from high to low, and quite an interesting character. So she was another feature in this. And then sailors have always been a part of the Soho mythology, people coming into the area and spending a lot of money and looking for a good time. So sailors have started to come into my work at this point. And this guy, Ironfoot Jack, was called the King of Bohemia, and he was a guy who had one leg shorter than the other and a big iron contraption on it, and he used to hang around. So he opened a gay club in the 1930s and got put in prison for it, and he was a kind of mystic guy who would just hang around the area. And this is an image that just kind of my interest in Chinatown as well. And I wrote a story when I was at college in '99 about Chinatown, so this is a reoccurring image. This photo has been a really big influence on me, and it shows the London School of Painters in Wheelers, which was a fish restaurant on Old Compton Street. And I just love this picture, and by John Deacon, and I just love what it's about, like a group of artists having this boozy lunch, and it was a massive influence on my work. So I took that and kind of added my own characters to it, like the sailor, and this is the first time the Minotaur appears, which he's got a big part of Spiritus Soho, as you'll see. And also, around this time, I was looking at this place called Le Macabre Cafe on Mare Street, and it was opened in 1955, and it was a death-themed coffee bar, and played all death-type music, and you drank your coffee off coffins, and kind of crazy idea that kind of existed till the 70s. And I found online, from looking on eBay, I found this skull that was for sale, which up the top is, they had loads of these skulls that were just on the tables. So I tracked one down, but unfortunately it was sold before I got it. And so I commissioned a friend of mine to make me one, where I put the writing, "Long live the Soho dead." So it was a kind of memento mori about Soho and about what was going on, the change in the area and how all these things were dying. Right? And this is an image of the Minotaur and the Sex Dwarf. The Sex Dwarf is a character that appears in a Soft Cell song, and I liked to kind of marry the two of these characters together, because the Minotaur is a character that in mythology guards the labyrinth, and I've always thought of Soho as a labyrinth, and that kind of, you can get lost in this labyrinth, so he's like the guardian of it. And this is a picture based on the Kinks song Lola, where a guy finds himself in a basement nightclub and has a dalliance with a transvestite, and I've always loved that song and the imagery that it portrays. So this was one of my first bigger pictures. This is A2. And then this is a scene with Soft Cell, the band from the 80s, with their famous non-stop erotic cabaret album. And this is them and the Sex Dwarf and Paul Raymond at the back on Walker's Court, which is now being transformed into a yuppie heaven. But at one time it was like the sleazy, real sleazy bit of Soho. So that's kind of a celebration of that. And then I started to get into this idea about Soho was the red light district for many years in London, and the way prostitutes have always advertised their wares is with these red lights. So I started to make this idea of making these red lights as images. And then this is based on a Picasso print where I've changed like the guy into a sailor and the other guy into a minotaur. So the red light acted as a spirit, so it's kind of, that's what I wanted to get across. And then this was another picture about when acid and psychedelia hit the 60s, and there was this famous shop on Carnaby Street called Lord John's, and this represents sort of when the consciousness expansion of the 60s happened, and there was this famous really psychedelic mural on that building, so I took that as reference, and then it kind of comes alive, and that's kind of what that one's about. This picture is probably the most important picture I've done to do with the concept of what I'm getting across in Spiritus Soho, and it's based on this place called, where it was the Gargoyle Club at one time. It's 69 Dean Street, and that's the back end of it, side entrance on Mare Street. Now it's the Dean Street Townhouse, and this is kind of a collection of everything that's gone on in that street. So that street at one time housed a house that Nell Gwyn, who was the lover of King Charles, lived in, and then it was knocked down and her ghost was supposed to haunt it. And then it turned into this really elaborate club called the Gargoyle Club, and that ran in the 40s and 50s. Then it turned into Gossips, which was a sort of late 70s club, where the first ever Bowie night was held, which from that came the New Romantic movement. So the characters in here represent the New Romantics, and then a bit later on, there was a club born there called the Batcave, which spawned sort of the goth movement. So there's all these characters in there. Then Gazza's Rockin' Blues originally was at that space as well. So it's all about how one space has so many different histories to it. And this is a portrait of William Blake, the mystic poet that was born in this tower block on Marshall Street in Soho. And the more I read about him, the more I thought he's sort of a guardian and a spirit of the area, because he was like this kind of mystic who hallucinated and wrote these kind of flamboyant poems. And then he kind of influenced lots of stuff, including the Beats and the hippies. So I kind of like the fact that there's this big monument, if you like, to him, this big tower block that he used to live in. And this is a picture of the postbox on Old Compton Street, which I feel is the centre of the universe of Soho. And I've always loved this postbox, so I wanted to kind of add William Blake and the postbox together. So, and I've taken a bit from Ginsberg's Howl, the poem Howl, because Ginsberg was very into William Blake. So I like the fact that all these things lead back onto each other. And this one's called Carnival at a Crossroads, where you see the flamed head hipster is on his postbox, and there's all these different characters that make up this sort of bit of Soho, and it's kind of a piece that has real and unreal characters in it, and it's looking up Dean Street from Old Compton Street. And then this is another person who was big in the influence of my research and development of Spiritus Soho, and this is this guy, his name was Derek Raymond, and he was a noir writer, and I really liked I came across his books but didn't know he had anything to do with Soho. And then one day I was in the French, and I saw my book and said, oh, that guy used to drink in this pub, and pointed to a light that had his beret on it, the beret he always used to wear. So I was like, oh right, he's one of like these spirits of Soho. So I got very into his writing, and he's become quite an influential character in it. And in this, he's down an alleyway, St Anne's Court in Soho, and he used to work there in the 60s in one of the sex shops. So this is him in the 90s in the foreground, in the middle ground, him in the 60s. Then in the background, him as a Etonian in the 40s. So yeah, he's very important. And this picture is of the French house, which has been an important part of my Soho history. And what I wanted to do in this picture is to bring together all the elements of all of the history. So I researched this picture from the 50s, and I got a photographer to take a new picture without anyone in the French so I could reference it. Then I added in these characters, and like Derek Raymond is in the other side of the bar there with the original Spiritus Soho woman, and then there's the original owner of the French house up there drinking wine, and there's the French sailors that hung out there in the war because the French Free Army used to use it as a base. And then there's the landlady Leslie now at the front of the picture. And this character here is Tom Baker, who was Doctor Who. And he used to drink in there in the 70s, and there's this great interview about him just describing a day in his life that was in the Sunday Times. So I quite liked to have this, this idea that this Time Lord was present in there as well, because a lot of the work that is in my Spiritus Soho book is about a sort of drift through time, a psychogeographical drift where all time is present at all times. So it's like this kind of sums that up. And this in the book is the last page of the book, which is like the death of the Minotaur and Sex Dwarf, which is kind of symbolic to how I feel about Soho now and how these characters have been snuffed out. And this was taken from a photograph, obviously not the people, but the area. One day when I walked around the corner and saw they'd started demolishing parts of Walker's Court, I took a photo and then based this drawing on that. And it's kind of a metaphor for what really is going on in Soho, like the, getting rid of the culture and getting rid of the independence. So this was the last image in my book, and it's basically, that's how I feel about the whole thing at the moment. And this is, yes, this is a plug, because this show is still on at the French House, Dean Street, if anyone's ever there passing. So this show's on till Saturday, and it has eight pieces of the work that I've made for the book. And this is the last slide, and this is the book, Spiritus Soho, which is available from me if anyone wants to purchase it. And the book is made up of all 4 years' worth of exhibitions and artwork with chapters with me explaining what each chapter, each exhibition is about. And I worked with one of the designers from Le Gun, Alex Wright, and we came up with this format and the style of the book. So that's it, I'm afraid, yeah. Okay.